The San Francisco 49ers start the season 1-0. Is there anything they need to clean up?
Lamar Jackson's usage has come into question after week 1 and him feeling a little sore.
Mike Tomlin says the Pittsburgh Steelers are preparing for their week 2 matchup with the Denver Broncos as if Justin Fields is their starting quarterback.
The Atlanta Falcons don't have time to mess around.
What is going on, college football fans? It is Bama, Wisconsin week.
Dolphins will host the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The San Francisco 49ers start the season 1-0. Is there anything they need to clean up?
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What'd you think about the 1-0 start from the San Francisco 49ers?
I mean, you got to love the win, right? I mean, it kind of was a little shaky at first. You know, you wait 7 months for football, and then the 49ers come out on offense. You're like, here we go. All right. Oh, 3 and out. Cool. But then after that, 8 straight scoring drives. So, you know, you'll take a win, offense good, defense good, special teams great. Like, yeah, it was a solid outing all the way around.
It's turning point for me. What'd you feel like watching the game? So Niners started out a little sluggish, felt like what I've been calling the last few seasons, week one's kind of extended preseason, it feels like, for a lot of teams. And we saw that around the league. Weird offensive line play. Croc talked about it after the Sunday games. And, you know, bad O-line play leads to bad quarterback play. Things looked a little funky in this game. And Niners, you know, get a turnover, go basically 3 and out, kick a field goal. That's their first points of the game. Then all of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers gets a little hot, rolls down the field, starts hitting Garrett Wilson, and they go up 7-3. And it was like, okay, well, they found their rhythm. 49ers haven't yet. That, you know, end of the first quarter, basically, like, okay, this could go a bad way. This could go a bad direction. And the response right there was 3 and out by the 49ers defense. And then boom, it all just went. It just started rolling for the 49ers. They scored. I don't know how many. What do you guys remember? What it was? How many drives in a row that they ended up scoring in that game? 8 drives in a row they ended up scoring in that game, and just laid it on the New York Jets in prime time. And you see Aaron Rodgers, and he's got no answers. And so that was a phenomenal answer for the 49ers, who showed up. And you know, a little goofy in the first quarter, a weird drive by Brock Purdy a little later in the game that Croc and I talked about was like, just sail it for no reason over Juszczyk's head. Then you bounce another one. Then you throw it into the backup tight end in double coverage. But aside from that, Purdy was awesome. He was the highest graded Pro Football Focus quarterback of the weekend. And the 49ers rolled to a victory, a resounding victory over Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. And so really a lot of people showed up in that one, including the young running back in place of Christian McCaffrey.
Hey, Croc, real quick. I missed yesterday's show, so maybe you guys already talked about it, but I want to get your take on Garrett Wilson's outfit, because it was so baggy. When he first walked out, I'm like, is this dude playing JV high school? Like, what is this jersey all about?
And he got us with the number change, which I think needs to be outlawed in the NFL. I'm like, who the heck is number 5, man? What happened to number 17? That guy looked fast. He looked quick. His jersey fit. Instead, he rolls out there with number 5, and it looks like his grandma bought him a jersey 2 sizes too big so he could grow into it.
I said that looked like he got his jersey from the team store, but I noticed a trend. It wasn't just him. Yeah. It was him. It was Sauce Gardner at corner. It was DJ Reed at corner. So I don't know if there's like this trend of wearing. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but
it looked like 80s unis. It looked like like Jerry Rice back in the day had a jersey once that was like,
and it wasn't even like the short like cut, no. like let's say Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo wore the loose sleeve, but it was kind of a shorter cut. Okay, you could kind of get away with it. I see Tyreek Hill do that, where it's like, I wouldn't do it, but okay, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. How Garrett Wilson, and maybe even more specifically Garrett Wilson, even more than the other guys, again, their jerseys were loose too. But Garrett Wilson, it looked like it was just it looked like Joe Namath out there, but like playing corner.
It was bad.
Yeah, that was gross.
It's like, you know how it looks like how I feel when I have to get dressed up and I got to wear like a shirt that I have to tuck in, because I never tuck in my shirt. I never wear dress shirts, but if I have to go somewhere where it's like an event and I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I've got a proper belt and I got to tuck in my shirt, and I feel like, well, it doesn't tuck in right. I feel like it's all loose and weird. That's what I felt like his jersey would have felt like for him. It's just too big. I don't even mind the long sleeves. I kind of like the old Jerry Rice long sleeves, showing all the stripes. I don't mind that at all, but just the whole thing didn't fit right. Croc really Wishnowski. I didn't really notice Wishnowski on Monday, but how he wore it at least before.
He used to wear it, yeah. But he's a puncher. He can do whatever he wants.
Disgusting, but all right. Yeah, I can give it a pass. I only see you once every blue moon, and I'm not even really paying attention to you. But man, when you see corners and they zoom in on those guys all on the TV, you just see these sleeves that look like the t-shirt I have on right now. It's a little gross. It's a little gross.
Yeah,
again, I'm all for newer trends, newer things. Ayuk did this thing last year. I didn't quite care for it, but all right, whatever. Where he wears like he has his jersey tight, but then under it he has like this loose shirt that it kind of like rides up a little bit, but it's loose. It kind of looked like that underneath his pads. I don't know if you guys can see, but it kind of looked like that. It was like a loose sleeve, and he had the tight jersey. I wasn't a fan of it, but like, all right, I know things change a little bit, especially since I played. But what Garrett Wilson had on, that was abysmal.
I think it led to their loss, guys. You look good, play good.
He didn't feel like he looked good. That's the thing. Like you're watching him and he kept like messing with something here and you looked at his face. He didn't look happy. It's like, of course you don't look happy. Look at your sleeves.
I think they just, it was a away game. They don't have everything. They just shipped the wrong jersey size or something. It was a jersey that was supposed to give away.
He didn't have to go to the team store and buy a jersey.
He did. He might have literally got it from the team store. And maybe they're just leaning into the 80s looking jerseys and the retro jersey look. Who knows? But they didn't look good the way they played for sure. And I don't know if it was because of the way they were wearing their jerseys.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Lamar Jackson's usage has come into question after week 1 and him feeling a little sore.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
Tough loss for the Ravens on Thursday night. They clawed their way back and are literally a toe away from that game-tying or even potentially game-winning touchdown. How you feeling after it?
Feeling pretty good, actually. There's a lot of things that I took from that game that were positive, obviously some negatives, but it's week 1 of the NFL season, and I'm just glad that football's back.
Yeah, 100%. And again, after we saw some of those other teams in week 1, like Cincinnati, like Cleveland, I think if you're looking at Baltimore's loss, you're feeling a lot better about it, considering it was the back-to-back champs. And look, I think for a lot of these teams, it is almost a preseason game, especially for the Ravens, who did not play any of their starters in the preseason, but it just counts a lot more when it's week 1. But for the Ravens, Sam, a lot to look ahead to, but I want to get some of your thoughts on the game first. The Ravens in this one went up 7-0. Whether Derrick Henry touchdown, they used him a lot on that drive. Chiefs come back and make it 7-7. Then game flow kind of got away from the Ravens, didn't utilize the run a lot outside of that with Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson used his legs a ton, 16 carries in this game. How did you think the Ravens' game plan and how they adapted to game flow was? Did you like what they did, or would you like to have seen them do a little bit more, particularly with Derrick Henry?
I would have loved to see more Derrick Henry, especially in the early goings. I kind of understand where they were coming from. The run blocking of the Ravens wasn't very good. The Chiefs were definitely closing those holes in the offensive line, especially the interior linemen weren't doing a great job of creating those holes for Derrick Henry to run. So a lot of it went on Lamar Jackson's shoulders, which I'm sure we'll get to. So I understand the reasoning behind it. I just think that if you're going to beat a team like the Chiefs, you cannot be one-dimensional. You have to be able to run the football and be effective doing so. The Ravens obviously did get 5.8 yards per carry, but a lot of that was with Lamar Jackson towing that rock. So I think moving forward, I'd love to see more Derrick Henry, but understanding the situation at hand for the Ravens, it definitely wasn't an AFC Championship game situation where the Ravens were very successful running the football and just chose to stop. It was a situation where the Ravens weren't really getting much going on the ground, and they knew that Lamar Jackson had to be the guy to do it. And with the scoring that the Chiefs are doing, it just seemed like it was going to be the Lamar Jackson show moving forward.
I think in some aspects, definitely a very similar conversation to the one that we had in the AFC Championship game after that loss. But to your point, they still ran the ball with Lamar, obviously, and some of those were scrambles, wasn't all designed runs for Lamar. But 16 carries in this game, as I mentioned. He ended up having, it was 273 passing yards, 122 yards on the ground. So Lamar kind of playing some hero ball in a way, in a lot of ways, honestly, for this team. But he was getting physical out there. We obviously talked about that body transformation, him dropping a lot of that weight, says he's feeling good, feeling spry. But he was lowering his shoulder into guys. He was taking hits. He was not backing down from contact. And I think, that fires you up. But at the same time, it's like, every time that any quarterback gets hit, not just Lamar, it's like kind of like, oh, get up, come on, get up. That's any quarterback in the league. But Lamar missed practice on Monday, Sam. And we heard reports from Mike Garafolo, from Adam Schefter yesterday on Tuesday. And essentially the message was he just needed an extra day. He was sore and beat up from the game against the Chiefs. And for a lot of people, that has sparked the conversation, especially paired with John Harbaugh's Derrick Henry comments from Monday, which was essentially, we didn't bring Derrick Henry here to be a 30-carry guy. It's about Lamar and Zay and Isaiah likely and Bateman and all these guys, Andrews. It's all about, the big conversation point is, you don't want to overuse Lamar and you don't want to, expose him to all of this. Do you think that this is a trend? This usage for Lamar is a trend that we're going to see for the entire season? Or do you think this was just we need to try to throw the book at Kansas City to try to get a big win in week 1, and we're going to see that usage dialed back a little bit from Lamar?
I certainly hope this isn't a trend. I think, and I mentioned this on my show last week, the Ravens really wanted to win this football game. They wanted to set the tone for the season. You could tell by the way the players acted after the game and during the game. They were really fired up for this game. And so a lot of that, you saw Lamar Jackson trying to set a tone with his physicality. And it cost him as far as getting some practice time in this week. I do think the Ravens are serious in the fact that they don't want Derrick Henry being a 30-carry back, but 20 to 25 is the sweet spot. I don't think you can have Lamar Jackson running 16 times and sustain a healthy quarterback for 17 games this season into the playoffs. So I think moving forward, the Ravens will be more diligent in their usage of Lamar. Definitely expect more runs out of Derrick Henry. And if not just Derrick Henry, then Justice Hill. Remember, Justice Hill only had 1 carry for 3 yards in that game. So getting him more involved, and if Rasheen Ali gets healthy from that stinger, maybe having him be included in that offensive trend. But for sure, 16 carries is a lot. Now, the Ravens' motto is do what it takes to win, and they were really trying to win. So they're not too upset with the 16 carries, but you can't have that for 17 games straight. That's going to be a lot, and I don't expect it to be so moving forward. But to the point of John Harbaugh, they'll do whatever it takes to win. So you may see a couple of games where he's running 16 times, and if they get the win, more power to him. But I don't think that trend is sustainable for 17 games.
Yeah, and that's been the big word, is sustainability for Lamar, especially over these last couple of days. I think we've kind of seen that conversation come back out of the dark, and everybody's now talking about, is this play style sustainable? Is this usage sustainable? Lamar's play style is sustainable. We know that that is not, and I see that's the conversation that's coming out of the woodwork, and I'm just like, no, that's the wrong conversation. Put that one away. The right conversation is his usage right now from the Ravens sustainable? And again, it wasn't all designed Lamar runs. He had to scramble, he got out into space, and I thought he did make a lot of good decisions of just taking rushing lanes when he had them. But part of this too is, if you brought in Derrick Henry to platoon with Justice Hill, you shouldn't have brought him in the first place. I mean, you have to be able to use him in the bell cow. And that's not what the Ravens have done over Lamar's career. They have not had a bell cow. It's been, whether it's Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins, or if you want to go back, and Kenneth Dixon during his rookie season, or like a bunch of other, you can pick a name out of a hat. They didn't have that 20 to 25 carry guy on their roster. And look, 30 carries, I agree with you, Sam. Like, yeah, you shouldn't be running Derrick Henry 30 times a game. I agree with that part. But 13 carries, especially for a guy where in that first drive he had 5, they were looking good. Yeah. Part of the reason you bring Derrick Henry in is if it's looking good, teams have to creep up into the box. And if they start to cheat in on that, just like we saw the Ravens do on that first drive, Lamar can take that ball, he can take it to the edge, he can work play action off of that. And there's so many ways. And it just felt like, Sam, we saw that on that first drive, and then we just never really saw it a ton after that. And then it was the high usage for Lamar. So all in all, I don't think the sustainability conversation should be put on his play style. That has already been answered, and we don't have to have that conversation. The answer is an astounding yes. But in terms of his usage, I think right now, and I'll just, I'll do the quick math here, 16 times 18, or I guess 17, I'll do minus 16. Look at this. We're doing quick math here on Locked On Ravens. That's 272 carries for Lamar this season if he has 16 carries. That, to me, from a usage perspective, is not sustainable.
Yeah, you can't have that for your franchise star quarterback. Maybe if you got Justin Fields back there, for sure, go for it, or Tyrod Taylor, why not? But Lamar Jackson, you saw it as far as the offense is concerned in that Chiefs game. You need Lamar Jackson to be healthy if you have a chance to win a championship, and 200-plus carries ain't going to cut it. So hopefully the Ravens learned their lesson. As you mentioned, the Derrick Henry usage was great early on, using him to kind of get those defenders to cheat up into the line of scrimmage. They need more of that. So hopefully week 2 moving forward, they implement more of that, and Todd Monken learns his lesson a little bit, and maybe we don't get 16 carries from Lamar Jackson in week 2.
Yeah, and I think that too, his arm complements his legs, and his legs complement his arm. And that to me is the big part of it, where I think you just want to show off his entire skill set. And instead of him, and look, scrambles will happen, and that will always keep his carries up into maybe even a higher range than the Ravens wanted it, because he will make things happen. And again, that's not the question we're talking about, because Lamar should absolutely run the football. Lamar should absolutely play to his strengths with both his arm and his legs. He has plenty of strengths with both. But from any quarterback perspective, anyone, and Lamar has actually become one of the smartest quarterbacks in the league with his body. Like that Kansas City game, I think, was an anomaly in terms of him just being super physical and lowering his shoulder into guys. I don't think we necessarily see that for a lot of other games this season. But to me, Sam, you mentioned it. He wanted this game. The Ravens wanted this game. I think for Lamar, his play style, keep doing it. Keep spamming it. Because we've seen the success, and, I don't care what anybody says about, his play style isn't sustainable. It is. His play style is sustainable. But you just want to keep your quarterback healthy, just like, guess what? All other 31 teams want to keep their quarterback healthy. And if you're not utilizing the players that you brought in, because the whole thing with Lamar, Sam, the whole conversation was, well, Lamar has to play hero ball. Lamar has to put on the Superman cape, and he has to be Superman for the Ravens. And you bring Derrick Henry in to alleviate some of that pressure and alleviate some of that from him. And then in week 1, you don't really use him that way. And so it's like, all right, Lamar, so, taking the Spider-Man suit out, he's looking at it and he's like, all right, got to put it on again. We got to go. That's not what you want. You want to have your players that you brought in be able to compliment Lamar, to take some of that off of his shoulders so he doesn't have to be Superman every week, both from just him doing it all, but also just from him taking the brunt of a lot of this contact, which, again, it's not an issue with him. It's not an issue with him and, he can't stay healthy. We're done with that conversation. It's about him and the Ravens putting him in the right positions over the course of the year.
Yeah, and I think that, it's twofold. One side of it is, take what John Harbaugh says with a grain of salt. I really don't think that he's the type of guy to give you all the information, but if he was honest, he'd say the offensive line did not give Lamar Jackson a lot of opportunities, nor did they give Derrick Henry a lot of opportunities. We had to use what we know to work, and that's Lamar Jackson escaping the pass rush, and it was getting there. I mean, I looked at the film. It just seemed like Lamar Jackson had no time in the pocket, and of course, Derrick Henry was getting hit in the backfield more often than not, especially after that first drive. So I think if the offensive line can get together, gel, maybe make some personnel changes. I know that's a tough topic for John Harbaugh, but do something to fix that O-line, and I think a lot of this alleviates itself. I don't think you see much in the way of Lamar Jackson getting all those carries and Derrick Henry getting so few. So I'll refrain from judging him too harshly until week 4, week 5 in the season, but I give him a pass because that offensive line was definitely struggling to create holes for Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I give it about a month. So yeah, week 4 before we kind of get those early season trends and we can kind of stop saying, oh, well, let's give it a week to week basis and then kind of getting up to speed. So once we hit that week 4, week 5, I'm right in that timeline with you. Then we'll start to see what's going on with that.
Mike Tomlin says the Pittsburgh Steelers are preparing for their week 2 matchup with the Denver Broncos as if Justin Fields is their starting quarterback. What?
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
But we still have a lot to talk about because Mike Tomlin did not, he did mince words, but he did open the door to this QB conversation kind of right away in his press conference this week.
He minced the words. He diced the words.
Yes.
He had that little slap chop thing from the infomercial. That's what he did to the words.
He very much did mince the words.
He said a lot of things. I don't know that anything he said meant anything. The Steelers are going to prepare as if Justin Fields is going to be the starting quarterback. Russell Wilson is going to practice Wednesday. Other than that, we didn't really get any definitive update on where things stand with the quarterback situation. I would assume that Russell Wilson is going to do everything he can to practice on Thursday or Friday. I would also assume that if he does find a way to practice in full on Thursday or Friday, that he is going to play. But Tomlin didn't really say, so I don't know.
So there's a few things that I thought was very interesting with how he worded it. And so I stitched together the few things that he said here about the situation. Here's Mike Tomlin talking about it, breaking down what's going on with Russell Wilson and what he sees in Justin Fields. So take a listen. Here's Mike Tomlin from Tuesday at his press conference.
And the same really for Russ. I just visited with him. He feels better today than he did over the weekend. And so what that means, I don't know as we sit here today. I know that we're going to take the same approach that we take with a lot of people in terms of injury. We'll first start with his participation and his level of participation, his quality of participation. Over the course of the week, we'll be analyzing whether he's capable of protecting himself, whether he's capable of being productive. When we get to those, points, that's when we'll ponder his inclusion or not. And when that happens will probably be a component of that equation. But as I sit here today, we're preparing as if Justin is going to be our quarterback. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. Speculation is a waste of time. Russell's hurt. He's not available to us. And so, as you guys know, as a general practice, man, I focus my energy on those that are available and their readiness. Just saw Justin. He just finished a good workout here today and excited about maybe going through a complete week with him in terms of the preparation process. But again, we'll take it day by day. Russ is not scheduled to work in totality tomorrow. To what degree, I do not know. And then we'll play it by ear from there based on the results and the things that we see in terms of whether or not we consider him and to what degree we consider him. Justin.
What did Justin show you exactly? Obviously, a rough start with the CQ exchanges, but it seemed to kind of settle in as the game progressed. What did you see from him?
I thought it was just that. I thought he settled in as the game progressed. I thought he had clear eyes in weighty moments. I thought he was a good communicator in some of those moments where we had some discussions. We had a big third down play late in the game, 3rd and 7. We had a timeout. We came to the sideline. We talked about leaving the ball in his hands. We bounced around some suggestions. He was a major component of that discussion. We went out. We left the ball in his hands. We had a designed quarterback run. He moved the chains in those circumstances. It was a lot of good. It's just good to be in the stadium with a guy. You're speculating until you are, and I just know a heck of a lot more about him because of that experience. And I'm sure he knows more about himself in this environment and us, and so it's just really good things to build upon.
So a lot of different things said there. I think the bottom line here, Alan, is that, like, look, you don't know if Russ is going to play, and there's a lot of other factors here. Again, you and I have talked about this. I'm sure if everything was the way Mike Tomlin wanted it to be, Justin Fields would be the guy there because he'd be young. He'd be your franchise quarterback. We wouldn't have to worry about anything. Next year, you'd sign him to a big contract and everyone's happy again. So, like, the dream would be, yeah, sure, if that worked out, but that's not the reality. Russell Wilson's the more polished quarterback, the more experienced quarterback. He's the quarterback that they wanted to be QB1, but he's not healthy. But at the same time, you look at Justin Fields, he played exactly the way you wanted him to. He made the right calls on Sunday, and I see why they're kind of like, you know what? There's no reason to rush Russell Wilson back right now from his injury until he is 100% healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike Tomlin's just doing the only thing that makes any sense to do, right? I mean, Russ, you saw Russ at practice last week. Like, he wasn't doing very much, right? And so if Wednesday's another day like that, maybe he's got a chance Thursday and Friday, but you can't build a game plan around maybes. So you go with the guy that's healthy and practicing now. And then if Russ gets healthy, then you look at, okay, what is it, Thursday? Is it Friday? Is it Saturday? And see, like, how much work have we already done? Is it too late to make a change now? And it, I think it says a little bit that they don't really think of Russell Wilson as this guy that is like, he is a very experienced NFL player, but he is not so ingrained into this team, this offense, because he is new to it, that, like, he can just pick it up without practicing. Mike said, like, I don't treat everybody the same. That's not necessarily a specific policy of his, but I think he made it pretty clear that Russell Wilson's going to have to get on the practice field before Saturday walkthrough if he wants to play in this game, because that's just the way it is. And so I think there's layers to this, but I don't really think he really tipped his hand a whole lot in terms of what he thinks is going to happen. He just sort of laid out the possibilities for us.
I think so, and that's the thing here. But I also think this possibility was left open by him. He was asked twice in this press conference if Russell Wilson was healthy and ready to go, would he be starting? And he says, I don't deal in hypotheticals. And then he even gave the second one, like, a little bit longer of an answer. And in doing that, he kind of opens the door for, wait a second, are these two guys in a competition? Is there something else going on here? Now, I think that the thing is, he's also opened the door for it could be absolutely nothing. But I think that's what Mike Tomlin wants. He wants a shroud of, you don't know what's happening. Ha ha, ha ha. That's what Mike Tomlin does with a lot of his things. But if I also think he could have easily just said, yeah, and then left it at that, and we would have just been like, okay, yeah, Russell Wilson's still QB1. Justin Fields is playing while he's hurt. Alan, why do you think he didn't give that definitive answer? Do you think it's because maybe Justin has crept into this conversation a little bit more?
It's a competition. It always was a competition, always will be a competition. Every NFL player that gets hurt and misses time is at risk of their backup taking their job. That is the reality of this league. It could be Russell Wilson. It could be TJ Watt. It could be anybody. Anybody can get hurt and lose their job while they're hurt. That's just the facts of life. And he doesn't know when Russell Wilson is going to get healthy, how long that's going to take. It took 3 weeks for him to play in a game after the first time he injured his calf. And then since then, he has re-injured it. So the second time, remember, Pat Freiermuth was hamstring last year. First time it was like 3 weeks. Okay, we got him back on the field. Then he re-injured it. Then it was like 5 before the time he came back. Like, usually the second time, they're even more cautious with it. So if it's a month before Russell Wilson comes back, he doesn't know what's going to happen. Yeah, absolutely. Justin Fields could play well enough in a month if Russ is off to take this job and run with it. Sure. I mean, it's not like the Russell Wilson that we saw in Denver last year, some insurmountable hurdle that, like, he's such a good player that he could not, it's like impossible to imagine him losing his job. TJ Watt, that one's a little tough to imagine. The Russell Wilson the Steelers have right now is not irreplaceable. So why talk about the hypothetical? Of course it's possible. He doesn't need to acknowledge that it's possible. And I don't know that it serves him any good to do so. So, just let it be out there. Absolutely. I think, look, Dan Moore popped up on the injury report with an ankle. If I'm Dan Moore, I'm at practice tomorrow. I don't care if I'm hopping along on one leg because you don't want to open the door for Mr. First Round draft pick. Like, that's way this league works. Everybody can lose their job if they get hurt.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Atlanta Falcons don't have time to mess around.
You Locked On NFL.
Luke, I'm coming out of the gate hot here. All right. One of my big, bold predictions for the season. I know, right? Shocker. I'm coming in hot. But one of my big, bold predictions for the NFL season this year is that Michael Penix would be the best quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. And look, It may be only week 1. It may only be week 1. But I think we are seeing the effects of a limited Kirk Cousins already. Kirk Cousins coming off the Achilles tear. I think that they didn't play action as much as you would normally want for a Kirk Cousins team.
None. Not one.
Aaron Freeman from the Falcons talked about. That's how he has to play. If you're asking Kirk Cousins to operate with limited mobility from the limited mobility he had already when healthy before the injury, and then without the aid of play action, which has been a big part of his game throughout his career, I just think it's going to be incredibly difficult. And Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons talked about this as well.
The Falcons hype train got derailed thanks to poor quarterback play and poor coaching. I'm Aaron Freeman with your Locked On Falcons Week 1 overreaction. If you were betting on the Falcons being one of the NFL's most improved teams in 2024, you might want to rethink that bet after a frustrating 18-10 Week 1 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kirk Cousins threw 2 picks, and the Falcons turned the ball over 3 times, resulting in 9 Steelers points, and that seemed to be the big difference in the outcome of this game. Coaching did Kirk very few favors with a lack of play-action passes and a very questionable strategy to leave T.J. Watt one-on-one all game. Can the Falcons rebound and begin to live up to the hype on the road in Week 2 versus the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football? Find out by following Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Luke, I would say that out of everyone at the network, you might know Kirk Cousins better than anybody else. Am
Against
I
my will,
crazy
yes.
here?
This is tough. So the reason that Kirk Cousins played bad, which he was bad, some of that was Kirk Cousins, classic Kirk Cousins, holding the ball a little too long, statue in the pocket, strip sacks. They got called back on penalty, but they were still bad. But the way you alluded to, the way the Falcons approached this, you and Aaron talked about it, no play action, pistol, all shotgun, no under center,
Limited
a way
mobility.
different offense than Kirk Cousins has seen.
Right.
And the reason for that might be the Achilles. So it's his right foot that's hurt, his right heel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one you plant on when you do long under center drop back. So maybe you want to take that weight off of it. You want to go into shotgun a lot, but you still want Bijan Robinson to have a head start. So that's the point of pistol. So that's why they did all that pistol. I actually think that's kind of a creative solution if you don't want to do that under center drop back. And that might be a short-term issue. But if you want to, say, okay, well, that means you're not too healthy enough to play and the backup Penix should go in. Then that's the argument, right? And that's, I think, like a more tempered argument than just Kirk sucks, put in young guy.
Right.
Which is probably smarter. But the other thing, and this is permanent, this is wild to me, they changed his alignment. So Kirk Cousins is a left foot back quarterback. You watch any highlight from him all the way from Michigan State through all of his years at Minnesota, he would always line up when he was in the shotgun, left foot back. And the reason for that is when you start your drop back, your foot is already a little back. You get a head start, and your drop back doesn't have to be as fast. You can get to the top of it faster. You can do quicker timing things. Things just work faster. That's going to be good for the offense. When you're even-footed, which is what the Atlanta Falcons have him doing for the first time in his career as a 36-year-old coming off of an injury, and missing a bunch of camp, they have decided to change his footwork. That is sort of a pistol thing that can be really useful on like read option. If you've got a running back on either side, you don't know which way the run's going to go. You don't know which way the quarterback wants to open up to. And like, it can kind of help you not tip your hand, but you don't have that head start that Kirk Cousins has always had. So the drop back's going to be a little bit slower. That means everything on the offense is going to be a little slower. That means guys like TJ Watt have a little bit more time.
And you add in the Achilles, and he's already going slower than he was going before. So it
exactly, and he's
issue.
Uncomfortable with it. That's the big thing. He's uncomfortable with it. So making him do something that is new to him, while also still looking a little stiff in the legs, and not at all what he's been good at for the last 12 years, utterly insane to me. I cannot fathom what Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson are doing over there. And that feels like that footwork change isn't something you do game to game. Like, I've never seen that. Quarterbacks are right foot back or left foot back basically always. And the pros and cons of those are more controversial than you would expect. But like that, whatever you do, you do. And that is the comfort that you get into. That's your swing. That's your rhythm. So to try to change that rhythm on the fly, like to try to change it back now, it might be too late. And so I don't know where the Falcons go from here.
And they need to hurry. Like, we talk about Cousins zoomed in, but as a team, the Atlanta Falcons don't have the time to like wait for this all to work out or wait for Kirk Cousins to get healthier. Like, the reason that they went out and got Raheem Morris and the reason that they made changes away from Arthur Smith is because being in the middle wasn't good enough and they need something to put them over the top. So they go out and they get Kirk Cousins. They bring in a bunch of pieces. They're pushing in to win now. And to lose that game in week one, the way that they did with all of the Kirk Cousins stuff that we've talked about, to me, it's unacceptable. And they need to make a decision here of, are they going to wait for this to happen and potentially risk ending up 7-10 again, just like Arthur Smith? Or are they going to go with who's the best quarterback right now, which I believe is Michael Penix? And not only do you get better quarterback play and a more open offense because you're not limited by the quarterback's previous injury, but you also start developing your young guy, which clearly they went out and got him for a reason because they think he's the quarterback of the future. So to me, it kind of gives you multiple options to have positive outcomes. And then when Kirk Cousins is healthy, if Penix isn't doing well, you could just go back and say, hey, it was a health thing, not a performance thing. And then you don't put Michael Penix on the bench for a benching. You know, it's just, hey,
right. You say, we got you a couple games and then we're good.
Exactly. Yeah.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, college football fans? It is Bama, Wisconsin week. How excited are you for this game, and how much have you been looking forward to this matchup?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one ever since it was announced. I'm making the trip up to Wisconsin, flying into Milwaukee, headed to Madison. Can't wait to jump around, the whole thing. So I love going to road games, and I love unique road games. I really appreciate Alabama and Wisconsin scheduling this on a home-and-home basis, too. Look, Alabama played Wisconsin back in 2015 in Dallas. It was a great game, at least for us. It sort of kicked off Derrick Henry's Heisman campaign. And, there was a very famous moment in there when one of the kids got hit and ended up in Alabama's huddle. One of the Wisconsin kids. But, I love those neutral site games because they did usher in a new era of Alabama. They started back with Clemson and Atlanta, and then they played teams like Virginia Tech and West Virginia and Michigan and Wisconsin and all those teams in the neutral site. And it was a lot of fun. But it's time to get back to some home and homes. And I'm thankful that both programs schedule this so we have an opportunity to go see this whole new environment. And I think Wisconsin fans will be, it'll be interesting to see what Alabama brings up there.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. Like, one of the joys of college football is every major program has their own unique idiosyncrasies, stadiums, pregame environments, traditions on field. And to get to interact with those fan bases, it's super special. I know Badger fans are stoked to have Alabama coming up this weekend. And I know a lot of people are already excited about going down to Tuscaloosa next year and being able to experience kind of what that is as well. So 100% agree. I can't wait for it. I remember that 2015 game really well. The player you're referencing is Michael Caputo, who was a strong safety who hadn't ran into a whole lot of backs like Derrick Henry. Not that many safeties in college football run into a whole lot of backs like Derrick Henry. So I remember that game very well. Close at halftime, but it always felt like Bama was obviously a far superior team there. And then the end of the game that was very, very obvious. So the home and home's incredible. Can't wait for it. Let's just start off maybe with, I think both teams maybe a little bit, and you correct me if I'm wrong, obviously coming off that South Florida game where that was a bit of a contest going into the third quarter. Wisconsin has had a couple games that haven't been quite as smooth either. What's the vibe right now for Alabama?
I would say there's a bit of nervousness in the sense that the offensive line seems a little unsettled, and that is an issue. But my thing on this, again, feel free to correct me. I feel like South Florida's defensive line is probably quicker than Wisconsin's defensive line. I don't mean that as a slight, because Wisconsin's line is probably bigger and stronger. So I mean, they each have their pluses and minuses. But where I think it was a real problem for Alabama this past weekend is especially Will Conformity, number 75. He had a real problem dealing with the speed. And I think that playing a bigger, stronger team is more up Alabama's alley for this particular offensive line. So I think that's one thing that has everybody sort of questioning the team right now is how well can this offensive line develop? Everybody's also very, very excited about Ryan Williams. I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction on this show, and I've said it a gazillion times. First of all, Locked On Bama is really a Ryan Williams podcast, and Ryan Williams is going to score a touchdown this weekend. I don't know how many. I know he'll score one. I really believe that. He's the youngest player in college football, I'm pretty sure, and should be a senior in high school. And I'm with the AHSA Radio Network, which is the Alabama High School Athletic Association Radio Network. And I've gotten to see this kid a bunch back when he played at Saraland in Alabama because his team was always in the state championship hunt. He's ridiculous. And to look at him, you would think, okay, well, he must look like Calvin Johnson or he must look like Julio Jones. He doesn't. He's not slight, but he's not huge. And he's not Tyreek Hill, but he's fast enough. He's just got an it factor about him. And I think he's sort of the talk of the town right now. And otherwise, Alabama would like to see some, maybe a little bit stouter performance from Jalen Milroe in the sense that here's what's funny. I love Jalen Milroe. I want him as my starter. I think he's fabulous. There are still some Alabama fans that are just not completely sold for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they just, the most famous player in Alabama is always the backup quarterback. That's been that way since I was in school there in the early 90s. So I think a lot of people just can't get out of their head that maybe he's not great at intermediate throws. But you know what he can do? He can sling it 1,000,000 yards, and Alabama's got some fast receivers. He's also great with his legs, and his decision-making has vastly improved. And frankly, he did take Alabama to the playoffs last year and the national championship team to overtime. So I love Jalen Milroe. I think there are some fans who aren't completely sold for whatever reason, but I think he could have a really big game this Saturday.
Yeah, listen, some of that's probably just being spoiled. And I mean that as a compliment, right? Like 95% of college programs would probably trade their starting quarterback for Jalen Milroe, if not more. I mean, that's probably a conservative number. So I think that's probably just a little bit of the product of the dominance that Alabama has put on the field for a long time. It's interesting to me. You mentioned Williams. What for Badger fan? He's the Bama receiver. I'm guessing some Badger fans may not be super familiar with the roster. Who does he comp to? Because you just mentioned not the biggest, not the fastest. Like, who does he remind you of?
Well, I'll give props to my Locked On Bama co-host Jimmy Stein. He thinks he comps to Devontae Smith very well. And Devontae Smith, and again, I know Wisconsin fans know who he is now, but when he was a freshman, he wasn't quite as famous until he caught a pretty big catch from Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship game. But, you know, he also caught a catch that year against Mississippi State, which won the game for Alabama in the closing minutes. He is just a special player. He works really hard. And again, Devontae Smith sort of the same way. He's kind of slight, but he just runs crisp routes. He's fast enough. He's elusive. And he's also just mentally there. He's not like he's not flighty. He's not worried about him. He's like, okay, let's play the next play. If something happens wrong with this one, play the next play. Devontae Smith's going to be a heck of a pro, and he just got signed to a contract that's going to prove that. And Ryan Williams is kind of the same way. Now, Ryan Williams, I will say this, is flashier than Devontae Smith. I've never considered Devontae the kind of guy to like be too braggadocious, even when he won the Heisman as a wide receiver. That just doesn't happen much. He's still a very humble guy. Ryan Williams, while humble enough, also has a little bit of wide receiver in him. And that's kind of cool because, if the one position you want to have some swagger is probably wide receiver or maybe defensive back. And Ryan Williams definitely has some swagger about him.
Yeah, you're dead on. It's those spots. Yeah, for Wisconsin through 2 games, I would say is kind of the general consensus. Like, they are 2-0, right? Which is not nothing, but they haven't played a whole lot of teams. We've seen some teams lose to teams that they shouldn't or have a lot of close games. So I tend to think it's a little bit of a team finding its footing still. Quarterback Tyler Van Dyke over for Miami is the transfer quarterback. He's manning the helm. No interception so far, but he's thrown some balls into harm's way. He probably should have a turnover that he doesn't. So I think against a more athletic, longer secondary, I think it's maybe not the prototypical Bama secondary. I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but still certainly athletic, long, and talented. There is arm talent there. So for Alabama fans looking at Wisconsin and just you kind of have that image of Wisconsin in your head, and images take a while to deconstruct, right? Yes. Wisconsin, big, strong, running. Yes, still to some degree, like Wisconsin and offensive coordinator Phil Longo want to run the ball. They still have a really big offensive line. It's a veteran offensive line, but Tyler Van Dyke gives them some arm talent Wisconsin hasn't had in a long time. With that, you get some decision-making stuff, but he has an NFL arm, and there are moments we've seen there's just not windows there, and Van Dyke can fit it in. Intermediate throws, slants, out routes across the field from one hash to the other. He made an NFL throw week 1. So you're going to see a quarterback in Van Dyke for Bama fans who may not be that familiar, obviously in Miami, but not in the SEC, who does have unique NFL talent. And it just comes down to consistency, how much pressure Alabama is able to get in on him. And if the pocket's clean, there could be some interesting things Wisconsin can do from a passing standpoint.
Alabama did face off against Tyler Van Dyke in 2021 when he was at Miami. He was there. He came in late. Alabama was up big at the time because Miami had a different starter whose name escapes me, but I know Tyler Van Dyke played in that game. And I remember him when he was being recruited out of Connecticut, and he was kind of a big deal. And I suspect he is pretty good. I find it interesting. He's only had 1 touchdown in 2 games, especially considering the opposition. And if that were the case, I would have thought, okay, well, Wisconsin, scored a bunch on the ground, and it didn't look like they really did that either. And I think that's what's going to be interesting is, has Wisconsin put a lot of focus on this Bama game and maybe not tried to show their hand quite so much, and they almost got caught with their hand in the cookie jar in that first game. I mean, that was a tight one. I watched a lot of that one. So it's just going to be interesting. I know we're going to talk about matchups in the second segment.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, You'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel anytime. For that $5 bet, you can take a look at some early lines for Week 2. The Packers are home dogs without Jordan Love as the Colts come to Lambeau. FanDuel has the Packers getting 3.5 points. Also, the total on that set at 40.5. I'm taking the over on that one. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dolphins will host the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night. And
you are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast.
So let's get into Buffalo, who has some new. They have some injuries. From your perspective, what's the biggest thing right now with the Bills?
That's probably Josh Allen's left hand. Obviously, Sean McDermott came out and said that he's been cleared to practice. He's been cleared to play in the game. That doesn't mean there's not something wrong with his hand. Clearly there is. He's practicing with the glove. He's got buddy tape on a couple of fingers, and you just kind of wonder how that's going to impact things. Now, I guess the good news for the Bills is that it probably doesn't affect his ability to just throw the football. But that's not all that there is to Josh Allen, right? I think we all understand the dual threat nature of how he plays the game. And it's not just running the ball and him using that offhand as a part of his skill set, but there's a lot of ball handling and play fakes and things that Josh does with his sleight of hand. That's an important part of how he runs the offense. And so how do the Bills have to work around that injured left hand, whatever the extent of the deal is? I'm sure Josh is going to play. It's just going to be a matter of how limiting is it in terms of the overall game that Josh Allen likes to typically play.
So for Dolphins fans who didn't catch the game on Sunday, this happened on the latest Superman leap into the end zone when he came down. Is that correct? It feels like he feels like he's got 3 of those Air Jordan touchdowns every season, but that's when that happened.
Yeah, he's building the hurdle highlight reel, jumping over Budda Baker into the end zone, and when he came down, his elbow landed on his left hand, and was in some discomfort. You saw he finished the game, but even the handoffs that he had later on, you could tell it was he kind of had to like compensate for that. And of course, immediately after the injury, a lot of swelling. Hopefully the swelling goes down throughout the course of the week, but it's definitely something that he's going to have to deal with in this game.
So what else? I know Taron Johnson's been a very impactful player for Buffalo, plays a key role in that nickel. Sounds like he's been confirmed out already with a forearm injury as well.
Yeah, confirmed out for the game. And obviously Taron Johnson, really good slot player, second team All-Pro last season, an important player, not just because he's a good player, but structurally how the Bills play defense. They play a base 4-2. They play him 100% of snaps as a nickel defender. They don't really play 3 linebackers. And I think you saw, he went out early in the game. I think he played 7 snaps, and then he was injured, forearm injury. And the Bills really struggled early against Arizona. And I think part of that was figuring out how to play without Taron Johnson. They just weren't as crisp with their coverage rotations, and the timing of some of their pressure looks, that type of stuff was off. And I think that speaks to Taron Johnson's impact on the team. But then Cam Lewis, who's in his 5th year on the team, just been around for a long time as like a Swiss Army knife defensive back. He came in and in the second half against Arizona, I would say he was very, very impactful. And so the question is, can he parlay that into this matchup? And of course, Miami stresses you in really unique ways. And so the Bills are going to rely a lot on Cam Lewis. And then, I know, Matt, in terms of Miami, they're going to play a lot of 2 backs. They're going to play multiple tight ends. And the Bills are not going to play multiple linebackers. They're not going to play 3 linebackers. They're more likely to lean into dime defense, right? They'll bring in that 3rd safety. That's what they did against Arizona. That's what they did last year. I anticipate that's what they'd like to do structurally. And I think that's a lot tougher when you don't have Taron Johnson in the mix.
So any finishing touches on injuries? And I'd love to hear from you as far as what was different with Buffalo, 1 game sample size against Arizona, but Joe Brady's impression on the offense. Think about the defense with some of the personnel changes that have happened with kind of a reworked kind of middle core with obviously Matt Milano out, with DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp now as the starting safeties of this football team. Each side of the ball, Any other injuries? And then beyond that, like, what were your impressions of what was new and what was old with Buffalo and how they played against Arizona?
Yeah, I think the only other notable injury would be DeJuan Smoot. He's the fourth defensive end. He's out for the game. So the Bills will be without him. I think everyone else should be good to go for Thursday night. In terms of just kind of some impressions on the newness and the style of this football team, starting on the offensive side of the football, you saw the Bills want to run the ball. I think that's a big part of what this team wants to be. They ran the ball really well last year, and I think they want to build upon that. I think they have a little bit more depth in the backfield with the drafting of Ray Davis, and Connor McGovern goes from left guard to center. David Edwards now the starter at left guard, and they've really leaned into the athleticism of the tackles. Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins are really dynamic athletes at tackle, and they pull those guys like crazy, try to get them front side and leading and clearing lanes for James Cook. And so the Bills ran the ball 75% of the time on first down. They want to run the football. I think that's going to be a big part of who they are all season long. Then the passing game is very different, right? Stephon Diggs not around. Gabe Davis not around. I think it's like a crazy percentage of Josh Allen's targets from last year is not around. And in week one, Arizona, I think, had the same thought everybody did. Well, they're going to throw the ball to Dalton Kincaid all the time. And Arizona keyed in on Dalton Kincaid very, very heavily in that game. And so the mantra of this offense is everybody eats, right? That's the whole design, is that it's not about any one player in terms of a weapon. It's, okay, yeah, you want to take something away. We got other players. Now, it's not like this inventory of elite players, but a lot of solid players that play complementary roles that allow the Bills to attack defenses differently, probably game plan specific and contingent on who the opposing team wants to try to take away. And you saw them lean into Keon Coleman, lean into Khalil Shakir at times in this game, lean into some of their misdirection stuff to open up the middle of the field, right? I think that's what they really want to be able to do, is stress the middle of the field. And as they do that, they've got the bodies to win on the outside in terms of bigger players to work the perimeter. And I think you saw that against Arizona really come to fruition. On the defensive side of the football, Bobby Babich, who's been with Sean McDermott for a long time, it gets a chance to run the defense now as a coordinator and play caller. And man, it's really different watching this defense, because I mean, it's been such a staple of guys for so long in the secondary. It really kind of hit me hard. I was watching the All-22 against the Cardinals. I'm like, man, there's no Trey White, there's no Jordan Poyer, there's no Micah Hyde back there, and then Taron Johnson goes down. You're like, that guy's usually around. There's no Milano. I'm like, holy smokes, who are these players? But
did you have to Google the R lads at any point? I had to do that one time doing my Dolphins. I'm like, oh, who's wearing that number now? Like, I can't remember.
Right, and then the couple of them change numbers. Like, it's definitely different. So it's I think structurally they want to be the same type of defense that they've been playing, a lot of cover three, a lot of quarters, zone heavy, force you to be disciplined. But it's just really unique watching the defense right now. I think a lot of what they need to be successful is winning up front with their defensive line, where I think you do have a lot of the more typical names that you're used to seeing up front. And Rousseau obviously had a huge game against Arizona, and Von Miller was very good against Arizona as well after a dreadful season last year coming off of the ACL. So the front looks strong. It's just a matter of the back seven, and then our back seven that doesn't have the mainstays, and Matt Milano and Taron Johnson. When you're embarking upon this transition, you certainly wanted to have those guys on the field to help with some of the newness around them. But the outside pair of corners in Benford and Douglas, I think they're a strong group altogether. It's a good duo. Interesting matchup against Miami, and then of course with all the other new pieces in that back seven, it's kind of a work in progress.
There's a lot of storylines for this game. Some interesting parallels with things that you talked about, with things Miami saw some of against Jacksonville that we're going to dive into. Miami has their own injuries to figure out. There's the Jordan Poyer, Saron Neal revenge game element of this. Feels like these teams have the Mike White revenge game. Not that he's going to play, but the impact. Seems like these teams always have an opportunity to exchange a couple players back and forth each offseason. So